Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Doing What Matters podcast. My name is Teresa McCloy, and I'm your host here on the podcast. And recently, we have shifted the podcast just a bit from the content that we were doing to some brand new content that we're super excited about as we have conversations with people about living from rest instead of rush. We're going to do conversations, we're going to do stories, practical wisdom, all those things included from people who are doing what matters in both their personal and professional lives. So if you've been listening for a while, thanks for hanging with us in this community. If you're a brand new listener, welcome in. We are so glad you are here. Today on this episode, I am going to be sharing a conversation that I had with one of our coaches here at the Real Life Process. And Winston Faircloth uses the content of the Real Life Process mostly in his own life, but I think you will enjoy hearing his journey and his path to doing things differently and stop living with his hair on fire. So join me in listening in on this great conversation of transformation from living from rest, not rush. Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Life Process podcast. I am super excited today to have a guest on who's actually been on the podcast before, but we're going to talk about what's new. And so Winston Faircloth, welcome to the Real Life Process podcast.
Teresa, I'm so glad to be back with you and your beautiful audience today.
Well, thank you. It is going to be an exciting episode because we are going to really talk about some shifts and changes as we're kind of in this series of how would you use the tool of the Real Life Process in the work you're doing, in the life that you're building. We've talked about coaching, we've talked about speaking, and in this particular episode, we're going to talk about this idea of inside of an organization or being someone who works with teams. Your brand, kind of your statement has been for love of teams. Mm-hmm. And even that has shifted and changed. But let's start first with just you personally. So tell me a little bit about your journey with the components and tools of the Real Life Process. Give us a little backstory.
Yeah, I'm glad to, friend. You have a gift of solving a problem for yourself and then sharing it with everyone else. And you had the problem of having your hair on fire. And, when you and I started working on the process a few years ago, my hair was on fire and I was like to the point of burnout with this. And so the process for me, I've used the process more for me initially before starting to apply it to others. And so for me, the opportunity to move from being so attached to achievement and doing and going and trying to be a cool kid, whatever the right term is, I was so focused on that, it led to burnout. And what the process did for me was an invitation to lean more into the being side of this. And I know doing and being seems a little obtuse, but it was all about, what am I doing to show up in the world versus how am I showing up in the world? What's the identity that I have? What are the core beliefs that I have that then show up for others? And so for me, the Real Life Process, the work of doing the every 90 days, I go through the entire process.
You do.
It's a fresh, new world because the change has been so significant that even the needs and values statements, for example, have shifted pretty dramatically quarter to quarter as I've gone through this really big transition in my life. And so, just that activity of going through the entire process, I know you don't recommend that everyone go through it completely fresh every time, but for me, it was really important as I was going through this transition to go through it as if it was a new activity for me. Many things carried over, but many things shifted quarter to quarter.
Well, and I think that's the depth that shows the depth that you have said, what I've been doing isn't working. I am on that train wreck. And so what I've been doing isn't working. So I'm willing to do whatever it takes to shift to a new place. And as you're talking about it, what he's talking about is walking through the needs and values assessment again, seeing has anything shifted and changed because you've made such a dramatic shift. Revisiting your real life statement. I remember when we first started working together, and you laugh about this. It's kind of public knowledge as we've been friends for a while, that your real life statement was really so much in the workspace because of the disconnect you had from the being and doing, from the who you are and how work defined you, that for you and for many people, just like you and I, a vision statement, a mission statement about your life meant what you were doing. And now to look at that statement and say, wow, and just see the shift. So for you, it's been an all in now for a couple of years of life is going to look different in so many ways. And so it's just been a fun journey to watch that experience.
Yeah. And I'll say that the real life view, which is that restatement of both the front side of it is all about the being, who you are and how you're showing up in the world. And then, the doing side is also very much a focus of the process in terms of committing to your intentions for the next 90 days and using that as a filter to decide what's most important to you, both in your work, your vocation, but also your personal and the relationships that you want to maintain and enhance over that time. So both of those were very important to me, to have that kind of rhythm and routine. And I love keeping those each quarter and then looking at them over the course of the year. It's like, oh my gosh, the kinds of things I thought were really important and vital at the beginning of the year, and then what they were at the end of the year. Maybe more people are stable than me. Maybe I'm just going through that midlife change later in life. But for me, it was affirming to be able to go back quarter by quarter and see the progression over time.
I think that, yeah, I do the same thing. I've kept things and I do mine digitally. Winston writes his out by hand. He has started a little bit to use a digital version, but I have kept, and I just, change the name and save the document so I can see it again. Just for our listeners, I think, because this is called the real life process, even though you and I are very similar, both type 3s on the Enneagram, both, that high D achiever, Colby quick starts, all the things in the assessments. The reason I call it the real life process is because everybody's real life is theirs. It's unique to how God wired and designed you. What are some of the areas of focus when we talk about those? What are the big rocks in your life? Share with us, other than profession. And I don't even know. I always tell people, everybody calls things different. Some people say that that's my job. Some people say it's my career. Some people say it's my profession. Again, it's how you uniquely identify. So we know that that's one for most people. But what are some of your other unique areas of focus that you've defined?
I happened to pull mine out. If you're on YouTube, you can see us. I just wanted to pull it. This is the one from the current quarter. You'll be surprised. For someone that's so achievement oriented, my areas of focus this sounds very esoteric, but I said I'm a beloved poet because writing has become very important to me over this time as a way of processing what's going on in my world and sharing my poetry and photography with others. I'm a team builder, which is related to my vocational work, but also my relationships. I'm a loyal friend. That was not really high priority to me as we began this process, and that's really drawing out more from my 6. Wrote down a contented steward. A lot of the achievement was really tied to desire for more versus really being contented and stewarding what I have. I am in rooted discovery. I'm developing roots and unfolding. And then I wrote about increasing margin as an area of focus for me. And all of those are interrelated, and they're very important to me in terms of the person I am now, and more importantly, for the people I want to show up for.
Wow. So much there that we could explore, because you hear in that for Winston, as he develops his areas of focus, there's kind of this, I'm a rooted, I'm a steward. Like there's these actionable words that he puts in his kind of, these are the big rocks in my life that I'm caring about right now. For other people, they write those completely different, which is what I love about the process. It does take a little work, but the work is so worthy of the reward that you get on the back end of it's uniquely yours. It's not something you read in a book and somebody gave it to you and said, these are the things. So I always love to just hear people's uniqueness. So thanks for sharing that personal part of your journey. Let's shift a little bit then to, okay, you've done this work in yourself. We can't teach what we haven't done, or we can, but it's not as authentic, right? How does this now show up? First of all, tell us the work you're doing now, because that's shifted. And then how's that showing up? So it's kind of a two-part question, but share a little bit from that space.
Well, For Love of Team really came about during this journey of recognizing how ineffective I was as a leader in my prior career. As a visionary leader, and I noticed this about other visionary leaders too, we love our idea. We love solving problems for people. And then we love people who pay for us to solve these problems. We really love and treasure them. And oftentimes that's where we can stop. We don't necessarily transfer this love and attention to the team that makes it possible. In the case of my prior career, I felt like those folks were obstructionists in some regard. They didn't get my beautiful vision, and they weren't taking care of the clients in the same way I would do it. And I would throw the team under the bus sometimes and take the client's side. And that created a very toxic culture. It wasn't until I was out of it for several years that I could see the damage that I did. And so For Love of Team was really started with the premise of, can we help other visionary leaders avoid the same fate that I experienced? And I do think it is a blind spot for many visionary leaders. And so that seems really broad and so open in terms of how we would execute against it. And so I came up with a framework about a year and a half ago about 4 different things we could do for visionary leaders. Well, Teresa, there are some things that you think is brilliant idea when you bring it to the marketplace. And then the marketplace really kind of tells you what they desire. And that was been my journey in this. Because I'd done the inner work through the process, I really became less attached to my brilliant idea about what the market might want. And I really started becoming more curious about what the market would desire out of the framework. So I had 4 components initially. And I was taking it out there to a very broad section of people, and it was crickets. It was really discouraging. It was, I can't tell you how discouraging it was. You spend too much time figuring things out and taking it out there, positioning, marketing, et cetera. And it was not getting traction. It was super frustrating. And so over time, people started saying, I really want this. I don't want the whole 4 things. I really want this one thing. And it's been an invitation to niche down and niche down and niche down over and over again, to the point now that there's, out of the 4 components, there are 3 of them I'm not so fond of anymore. And there's one that just seems to really resonate both for me in my personality and my prior experience, and for the people I serve. And so it is a very niche kind of service that I deliver now to a very niche audience that I have a lot of relationship with and equity in terms of this industry and experiences there, both working inside the industry, working for the industry, and competing against the industry. So I have really a unique perspective that I bring.
And I think what's so, just God's story moments about all of this is also the more you opened your hands and let go, the more that there was a reconnection back to kind of a time in your life where these relationships were where, this industry, this niche down space. Yeah, it's just this healing full circle moment of like, wow, I'm right back in this space. that I never thought I would work with again, or never thought I'd be with again, or even felt that there was damage done there and all of these things. But yet the redeeming of the story of like, I'm right back there in that space. So as you worked through all of this and came kind of full circle in it, then and you're back working with teams, you've really, really listened to the feedback. And I think that's something, as you work with organizations, like listen to what they're wanting. And you were willing to lay down your, type 3s are very image driven, very like fear of failure is like, that's, we don't want to fail. You instead held it with open hands and said, no, I'm just going to listen, just going to sit with this. I'm not going to push it away. I'm going to really lean in. And as you've done that, share with me what you were sharing before we started recording about how small this niche audience really is that you're working with now, or it's not really an audience, it's an organization, places that you're really working with. And then how the process is really being a foundational piece that you're not really reteaching the process, but how you're using it within this very small audience.
Well, Teresa, one quick funny story before we get there. How did I choose re-choose this focus? It is so important that you have coaches who speak the truth into your life. And in this case, my coach was an accountant. And as I was beginning to come up with my plan, about a year ago, as I was coming up with my plan, the coach or the accountant we were looking over the books from the prior year and kind of mapping out the game plan for the future year. And I was saying, I was struggling with trying to choose between a couple of really good options. And I'll never forget this because I said, well, I really want to do this over here. He said, well, if I look back over your books for the last year, you got 90% of your revenue from nonprofit organizations. And why wouldn't you just kind of focus on that? And I said, well, nonprofits aren't real businesses. I want to work with big businesses. I want to work with these cool startups and things like that. He says, well, Winston, you may not think nonprofits aren't a real business, but your bank account does. They really enjoy it. And so that was the moment that invited me to go back to my roots and really begin to hone in on my nonprofit experience over 40 years now, working in that group. And so today, my niche, I don't have to serve the masses. There are 300 people in the whole world that fit my niche. You may be saying, folks, are you one of the 300? Here's who I'm looking for. I'm looking for United Way executives in the C-suite, especially the CEO, the CFO, and the COO. And those 3 people are the people I can most help with making sure that their business processes work to support their mission, to optimize those processes, to leverage technology where possible to fulfill their mission. Those are the people, and there may be adjacencies to that, right? There may be other organizations like this, but there's only 300 people in the whole world I care about. It's those 3 people in the top 100 United Ways that I most want to serve with the services that we've developed.
And I love, especially in this, organizational space, for so many people to lean into their sweet spot, what they know, and really say, I'm not for everyone. I am for these people, and I serve them at the highest quality I can, give them 100%. That it feels good to you, and it feels good to them to say, well, of course. So if you're listening, really hear this part of even the journey. It started with his own work first. Winston did his own work first and then was able to go, wow, what is out there? And by work, I mean internal work, aligning himself to his rule of life, how he wanted to live it. Before we hit record, we were talking about, doesn't it feel good to go, I'm not chasing all of that. Like the stress is so different, but that was due to all of the internal work he did first. And then it's like God just opened the door and said, okay, so now that you're ready to do that, here's what I have for you. And here's where it's at. And here's the people that I'm calling you to love on and show up with. So how does all of that have you show up differently inside of these United Way organizations that you're serving?
Well, I think, Teresa, it comes from the fact that if you go back to what you know best, right? The people you know best, the services you know best, coming from your own personal experiences of success and failure in that earlier season of life, you're able to speak directly to their challenges. You're able to use terminology and phraseology and concepts that really resonate and help them anticipate what's coming. And so for me, the real life process has brought a peace and a calmness to my work with them. In fact, I begin every one of the sessions, and these are high-powered, high-energy leaders. They don't really tolerate a bunch of monkey business, but they do appreciate the fact that we begin every session with a moment of gratitude. In a business setting, we do that. And I do it for two reasons. One, it gets people focused on the task at hand. And two, it gets them in a good state for creative problem solving. And I don't think I ever would have introduced that concept in my previous life. I would have been, let's get to task. We've got these things to get off the list. Let's do it. And no, I want them to show up as their best person in their best real life as we enter this space of collaboration together. And so it's given me permission, honestly, this kind of work has given me permission to say, we're people first, we're a role second.
Yes. You're showing up with the whole person and you're noticing the whole person. And it doesn't matter, how high up you are in an organization, you're still a person. And I often say that in the coaching space. And you really are leading, coaching, consulting with these people that are at the highest level inside of their organization. And yet, they still got up and ate breakfast that morning and they still, drove into work. And when you refocus them back into their center, even with that moment of gratitude, you can just, I'm sure, see but until you did that for yourself and you took the breath, you couldn't lead them to take the breath. So that even small piece right there is why people say, oh, I want to work with you because you show up differently for my organization.
The other part of that too, Teresa, is that I serve out of a full cup. Our friend Dan Biller talks about that all the time. Yes. And so there are things I do for free, not because I need to do them for free or want to do them for free. I do them because they serve the people I want to serve in a high way. So I run a small cohort of leaders where we create this space for them to be themselves, to not have to worry about their title, just to be themselves. And I don't charge for that because it's good for me too, to hear what's going on with them. It gives me ideas of how I can serve this particular group of 300 people really, really well. And it makes me feel good to offer it to them for free.
And you're showing up with a generosity mindset, not a scarcity mindset. You show up so much differently when we can show up from, yes, my cup is full. I've done my real life work. I've created my rule of life. And my work fits into that. My work is not driven. The professional work I do is not driven by that. It fits into it. Your life is rich and full in other ways as we go back to those areas of focus, that loyalty of friendship, the different things that make the cup full. So we're not trying to pull all of that from the work we do inside of these organizations that you're working with. So that's a beautiful thing, my friend.
Well, the other thing I'll just share, Teresa, for the threes out there and for the people who are definitely on the achievement track, let me just share that already this year, in the first quarter of this year, because of it wasn't anything of my brilliance, or I want to say that right up front. I think it's surrender. I think it is the inner work that's going on. But in the first quarter of this year, we've already booked as much as we had all of last year, which was not a bad year. And we're on pace to double that in the second quarter.
Yeah.
And again, a very niche. You heard 300 people in the whole world that could use this service. We're working with 10.
Yeah.
And 10 alone can make this kind of multiplication happen. So I wish I had been wise enough earlier in my life.
Oh, don't we all?
to have decided to not run away from what the life experiences we've had or the people that we've served in the past and trying to pursue something else. And so the real life process, to bring this full circle, the real life process for me has really kind of given me an invitation to keep going back to that center, keep going back to that reunion, in a sense, of who I was always created to be. And more importantly, to serve the people that I was always placed to be serving.
Oh, such good stuff. So you have shared, this is who I work with. This is what I do. And in case someone is listening that is in that very, very unique niche market, how would they connect with you, Winston, if they're like, whoa, this is the guy we need? How would they connect with you?
Well, our domain is for loveofteam.com, and it is for love of team, no other words in that phrase. And, I invite visionary leaders of not-for-profits. Yeah, I work with United Way. That's my micro niche, but nonprofit leaders who want to not make the same mistakes we've made or to learn from our failures. That's where you can connect with me and the team here. And then I also do my poetry and photography on my Instagram, which is at Winston Faircloth on Instagram. It is faith-centered, but it is a pilgrim's journey of working through a lot of this journey. And so it's my way of working that out. And I call it a reunion tour. But it's part of my daily practice.
Yes. And those daily practices, those rhythms, behaviors, and routines are something you have embraced. And that gives you that ability, as we say, to serve these organizations from a very full cup, my friend. It has been a beautiful journey to watch over the last couple of years. And this is a full circle moment to go from where you were, even on some previous episodes. We'll put those in the show notes. You might want to just follow the saga of like Winston's journey. And then we'll also put where you can connect with Winston. And as we talk about those behaviors, rhythms, and routines, one of them we do here at the Real Life Process is how we close each and every episode with the phrase, because it is so important. And you have embraced that so much. I've seen it in your journey and the journey of many others, but it is that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for it. And we'll be back next week with another story from the Real Life Process podcast. Thanks, Winston, for being with us. Hey, everyone. I just wanted to hop back in and share one more thing with you. Right now, we are getting ready to launch our very next Real Life Process certification cohort. It will be starting here at the end of July 2023. And we want you to check it out. If you are a coach, a speaker, a workshop leader, a trainer, or a leader within an organization, the Real Life Process might be a great tool for you to have in your tool belt. So head over to therealifeprocess.com/get certified and check out our 6-week certification program. Many times this summer is a great time to take on some extra learning and put a tool in that you can use in your everyday, ordinary life and use with the clients that you serve. So come hang out with us in our next cohort certification. Remember, you can find information in our show notes and also at therealifeprocess.com/get certified. Have a great week, everyone.